So living with a cat is, well, it's kind of like living with a professional poker player.
Oh, absolutely. World class.
Right. Like they have this incredible, almost unbreakable poker face, especially when they're in agonizing pain. And, as a pet parent, that just puts you in this incredibly tricky position. You're constantly guessing.
Yeah, it's a really stressful spot to be in.
It is. So today, our mission for this deep dive is to basically decode that secret language of pet pain. We've got this fascinating stack of sources today.
Really amazing stuff in here.
Yeah, we're looking at veterinary academic papers, emergency triage protocols, and even the mechanics behind this brand new diagnostic AI. And it's all to help you, the listener, become fluent in spotting when your pet actually needs medical help, but without, drowning in all that medical jargon.
Right, because to understand why this decoding process is so hard for us, we really have to look at the deeply ingrained evolutionary biology here.
The survival instinct stuff.
Exactly. I mean, hiding pain is just a non-negotiable survival mechanism for these animals. Out in the wild, if you show any physical weakness like a limp or, any behavioral vulnerability, you immediately paint a giant target on your back.
Right, for larger predators.
Yeah. The animal instinctually knows that showing pain equals death. Fast forward to today, and, well, they're completely safe in our living rooms.
Yeah, mostly protected.
Right, but that ancient survival programming, it's still running in the background. It completely overrides their current reality, which makes our job diagnosing them incredibly frustrating.
Their operating system basically hasn't updated to realize their biggest threat is, like, the vacuum cleaner, not a coyote.
That's a perfect way to put it.
But before we jump into using advanced technology to bypass that poker face, we kind of have to establish the baseline, right? Like the broad behavioral changes you should be looking for at home.
Yeah, the veterinary data really points to subtle shifts in what they call their activities of daily living.
So we're not talking about, like, massive, dramatic cries of pain here.
No, not at all. It's much quieter. We're looking at things like pacing or this relentless restlessness where they repeatedly get up, circle around, and lie back down.
Just unable to get comfortable.
Exactly, because their body simply cannot find a mechanical position that takes the pressure off a sore joint. You also really need to watch for a sudden reluctance to engage in vertical movement.
Like jumping.
Right. A cat that hesitates before jumping onto the couch or, completely avoids the high tiers of their cat tree is heavily signaling musculoskeletal discomfort.
Okay, that makes sense.
And another documented, but easily missed indicator is this fine trembling in the rear legs when the animal is just standing still.
Oh, wow. Just standing there shaking.
Yeah, it's a sign of muscle fatigue compensating for joint pain. But actually, perhaps the most complex shift is how pain alters their grooming habits.
Oh, this part.
Right, because it manifests in two completely contradictory ways.
Yeah, that contradiction really stood out to me in the sources. Like, on one hand, you have cats who just abandon grooming altogether, right? They end up with this messy, unkempt coat or severe mats developing right over their hips or lower spine.
Which is exactly where it hurts.
Right. But then on the flip side, some cats do the absolute opposite. They overgroom obsessively, traumatizing the skin until it goes completely bald just because the tissue underneath is sore.
It's wild to see.
So, okay, let's unpack this. To put this in human terms, is this overgrooming kind of similar to us subconsciously rubbing a sore shoulder or like massaging a tense neck without even realizing we're doing it?
Taking that human analogy a step further, it is the exact same physiological attempt to self-soothe.
Really?
Yeah, when you rub a sore shoulder, you're actually stimulating alternative nerve pathways to block the pain signals traveling to your brain.
Oh, well, so it's a distraction technique for the nervous system.
Exactly. A cat feels a deep ache, and their instinct is to stimulate that area, but their only physical tool is their tongue.
And a cat's tongue is like sandpaper.
Right, the barbed tongue overstimulates the skin, which leads to that baldness. But beyond grooming, posture tells a profound story too. A cat in pain will completely alter its physical geometry.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, they might stand with their front legs shifted abnormally far back under their chest. They do that to offload weight from painful rear hips. Or when they're resting, instead of, stretching out lazily like normal, they'll tightly tuck all four legs underneath their body.
Right. In a highly tense, guarded position, they just look coiled, like a spring.
That's it, exactly. And if that coiled spring snaps...
Like sudden aggression?
Yeah, say your normally sweet cat suddenly hisses when you try to pick them up, or growls when another pet simply walks by. We have to recognize that as a defensive physiological posture, not a behavioral failure.
They're just anticipating the pain.
Right, they know the interaction will hurt, so they're preemptively protecting themselves.
I love that. Reframing sudden aggression as a pain response rather than just, bad behavior
Yeah.
completely changes how you approach the animal.
It changes everything.
So if whole body posturing is the first clue, the face is where the real diagnostic data is hidden, right?
Yeah.
We can transition from broad behavior down to facial microexpressions.
And this is an area where veterinary diagnostics have taken a massive leap forward. Researchers have actually developed something called the feline grimace scale.
The feline grimace scale.
Yeah. It's a scientifically validated clinical tool that assesses acute pain based entirely on microscopic changes in facial tension. And the scale breaks the face down into 5 specific action units.
Okay, wait. Action unit sounds like a term pulled straight out of a robotics manual, not a vet clinic.
Yeah.
How exactly are we scoring a biological face like a machine?
Well, by completely removing the emotional interpretation and focusing purely on structural geometry.
Okay, so mapping the face.
Right. The 5 units are air position, orbital tightening, which is essentially just how much the eyes are squinting, muzzle tension, whisker position, and head position.
Got it.
And each unit gets a score from 0 to 2. 0 means the sign is absent, 1 means it's moderately present, and 2 means the tension is markedly, undeniably there.
So let's paint a picture for the listener of what a maximum score, a 2 across the board, actually looks like. Because the data describes the ears being completely flattened against the skull and rotated outwards, right?
Yes, the classic airplane ears.
Airplane ears, exactly. The eyes are heavily squinted, almost shut, and the muzzle, which normally has a relaxed round appearance, becomes incredibly tense and takes on this elliptical stretched shape.
It's very distinct once you know what to look for.
And the head is held low, dropping below the shoulder line, or tilted down with the chin pulled tight to the chest. And the whiskers. This was interesting. They become remarkably straight and move forward, pointing away from the face.
Right. And when you calculate the score across all 5 of those action units, a total of 4 or more out of 10 is the clinical threshold. That's where veterinary protocol strongly suggests giving analgesia.
Meaning the animal is in actionable pain and needs meds.
Exactly.
Now, translating those microexpressions into a number sounds pretty daunting for a normal pet parent, but this is where the diagnostic AI comes in, right?
It is. It's a game changer.
There's this new tool called the Cat Pain Check app that literally automates this entire grimace scale. So you basically just snap a photo of your cat's face with your smartphone, and the AI algorithm evaluates those 5 specific action units in seconds.
Yep, it's incredibly fast.
I'm picturing this working essentially like the facial recognition software at airport security. But, instead of mapping the distance between your eyes to match a passport, it's mapping the tension triangles in the cat's face to detect pain signals.
That is precisely how the underlying machine learning operates. The algorithm identifies fixed landmark points on the face, like the medial canthus of the eye, the base of the ear, the outer edge of the muzzle, and it calculates the spatial deformation of that geometric mesh.
So it's not looking at the photo and saying, oh, the cat looks sad.
No, not at all. It isn't subjective. It is mathematically measuring the physical tension. It gives you a severity score and even tracks changes over time.
That's amazing.
However, the developers are very adamant about the limitations here. This is a supplementary communication tool for you to use with your vet. It's not a replacement for medical training.
Right. It's a brilliant way to gather evidence, but it doesn't write prescriptions.
Exactly.
But, okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Looking at the mechanics of those action units, I have to push back on the whiskers thing.
Oh, the straight whiskers.
Yeah. The scale states that whiskers moving straight and pointing forward is a definitive marker of pain. But, I've watched cats play, and when they are highly curious or actively tracking a toy, their whiskers are pushed entirely forward.
What's fascinating here is that the curiosity response is real, but it highlights exactly why the algorithm analyzes the full geometric mesh, not just an isolated variable.
Oh, okay.
A curious hunting cat absolutely pushes its whiskers forward to gather sensory data, but a hunting cat does not simultaneously flatten its ears outward, tightly squint its eyes, and tense its muzzle into a stretched ellipse.
Oh, I see.
It's the synthesis of all those specific geometric points together that creates the grimace profile. The AI is highly adept at calculating that combined pattern instantaneously, whereas the human eye tends to focus on just one dominant feature like the whiskers and misinterpret the whole context.
That makes total sense. You're looking for the complete constellation, not just a single star.
Perfectly said.
Okay, so let's say the AI analyzes that constellation and tells you the grimace score is alarmingly high. You know they're in pain, but pinpointing internal invisible pain is an entirely different puzzle.
It really is.
To illustrate how tricky this gets, we can look at FLUTD, or feline lower urinary tract disease.
FLUTD is basically the quintessential example of complex hidden pathology. It isn't even a single disease. It's a broad umbrella term describing various conditions affecting the bladder or urethra.
And the outward behavioral clues are usually things like pacing, visible straining in the litter box, or sudden house soiling, right?
Right.
And the research is very clear that house soiling in this scenario, like a cat urinating right over the edge of the box onto the floor, is not a behavioral rebellion.
No, not
They
it.
do it because physically compressing their abdomen into that standard squatting position triggers immense pain.
Exactly. When we dissect that umbrella term, the underlying causes are really striking. In the vast majority of young cats, so those under 10 years old, the primary culprit is feline idiopathic cystitis, or FIC.
FIC,
Yeah. And in a smaller percentage of cases, you're dealing with urolithiasis, which is the formation of physical urinary stones.
like kidney stones, but in the bladder.
Right. And those stones fall into two main categories. You have struvite stones, which form in alkaline urine and can actually often be medically dissolved using highly specific prescription diets.
They just melt away with the right food.
Basically, yes, the diet acidifies the urine, but then you have calcium oxalate stones, which are impervious to dietary dissolution. Those require physical extraction.
And reading about the extraction process for those calcium stones, it involves a procedure called voiding urohydropropulsion.
It's quite a mouthful.
Yeah. How exactly does that work from a mechanical perspective?
Well, it's essentially an application of fluid dynamics. Under general anesthesia, the vet fills the cat's bladder with sterile saline until it's distended. The cat is then positioned vertically, so gravity naturally pulls the heavy stones toward the opening of the urethra. Then, the vet applies steady manual compression to the bladder, creating this high-pressure fluid current that physically sweeps the small stones out through the urinary tract.
Wow. So they're literally using physics to flesh out the plumbing.
That's exactly what it is.
But pivoting back to the most common cause you mentioned, the feline idiopathic cystitis, or FIC, the data shows that FIC is driven by an excitatory sympathetic nervous system response to stress.
Yes.
I really want to understand the mechanism here. How does psychological stress like, I don't know, a new couch or a change in your work schedule translate into severe physical pain inside a bladder?
It's wild, isn't it?
Is this the feline equivalent of a human developing a massive stress-induced bleeding ulcer?
The ulcer comparison is biologically very sound. So when a cat with FIC experiences a stressful event, their sympathetic nervous system goes into overdrive. It triggers this massive cascade of stress hormones.
Okay, standard stress response so far.
Right, but in these specific cats, those hormones directly affect the protective glycosaminoglycan layer, which is basically the mucus lining that coats the inside of the bladder wall.
Oh no.
Yeah. The stress response actually breaks down that protective barrier. It increases the permeability of the tissue. Now, cat urine is highly concentrated and very caustic.
So it burns.
Exactly. When that protective mucus layer degrades, the acidic urine seeps directly into the unprotected submucosa of the bladder wall. It activates thousands of raw pain fibers and causes intense physical inflammation.
That is staggering. Their emotional anxiety literally strips away the physical lining of their internal organs.
It's a brutal physical reaction to a psychological trigger.
And because the root trigger is environmental stress, I imagine you can't just fix it with a standard pill.
Right. You can't. The primary medical intervention is actually environmental. It's a protocol called MEMO, which stands for Multimodal Environmental Modification. Yeah, it focuses on reducing the psychological triggers. So providing the cat with elevated safe spaces, eliminating competition by separating food, water, and litter resources into totally different zones of the house, and just meticulously reducing social conflict.
Which brings up a massive trap regarding causality and critical thinking that the research highlighted.
Oh, the antibiotic trap.
Yes, because pet owners often notice the straining, they take the cat to the vet, they receive a prescription for antibiotics, and within a few days, the cat seems completely cured. So the natural conclusion is that the antibiotics killed a bacterial infection.
And this is a classic logical fallacy. True bacterial urinary tract infections are exceedingly rare in young cats.
Really?
Very rare. The biological reality of FIC is that the flare-ups naturally and spontaneously resolve on their own, usually within 1 to 7 days as the bladder lining repairs itself.
Oh, wow. So they just heal on their own anyway.
Exactly. The owner administers the antibiotic, the FIC naturally subsides at the exact same time, and the owner falsely attributes the physiological healing to the unnecessary medication.
They think the pill did it.
Right, and this highlights why thorough diagnostic testing, like a urinalysis, is crucial. You want to avoid bombarding the animal system with antibiotics that disrupt their microbiome for absolutely no clinical reason.
Makes total sense. So, okay, you've connected the dots, you've noticed the behavioral shifts, maybe you utilize the facial recognition AI, and you suspect an issue like FLUTD or a mobility problem. The next hurdle is actually proving this to your veterinarian.
And that's where it gets tricky.
Right. Because it is a universal law of nature that the second you carry your pet into the exam room, adrenaline masks their symptoms and they act perfectly fine.
Yeah, we call that the exam room miracle cure. It is a massive hurdle in veterinary diagnostics. Adrenaline is a powerful temporary analgesic.
So they literally don't feel the pain in the clinic.
Exactly. And this is where your smartphone becomes the absolute most critical diagnostic tool you own. Veterinary neurologists actively argue that for sporadic, episodic issues, a smartphone video is often more valuable than an MRI.
Wait, really? Better than an MRI?
Honestly, yes, because an MRI provides a brilliant static image of anatomy, but it cannot show dynamic, functional pathology. A video captures the real-time misfiring of the nervous system as it actually happens in the natural environment of your living room.
But the clinical guidelines are strict on this. You can't just hand the vet a shaky, poorly lit video and expect a diagnosis.
Right, you need to be strategic.
Yeah, if you're documenting a gait issue like a limp, a neurological wobble, or dragging a limb, the sources say you need to capture at least 10 full strides.
10 strides minimum.
And you must film from 2 distinct angles, a pure side profile, and a shot of the animal walking directly toward and directly away from the lens. Plus, you need natural, bright lighting, and you should intentionally place the pet against a background that contrasts with their fur so the specialist can clearly track the outline of the joints.
All crucial details.
Oh, and if the dog is on a leash, the dog must always be positioned between the camera and the handler. You don't want the human's legs obstructing the diagnostic view.
Right, the human legs just get in the way. And the protocol shifts slightly when you're dealing with an episodic event, like a seizure, a focal tremor, or a fainting spell.
What's the rule there?
The cardinal rule for episodic videos is to maintain a wide shot of the entire body. Human instinct is to zoom in tightly on the twitching leg or the shaking head.
Because that's where the action is.
Right, but
Right.
do not do that. The neurologist must see the posture of the spine, the position of the non-affected limbs, and the state of the eyes simultaneously. That's how they determine which specific sector of the brain or spinal cord is short-circuiting.
Okay, full body shot. And the guidelines also stress that you must keep recording for a full 30 seconds after the episode visually ends.
Yes, the postictal phase.
What's that?
It's the recovery period immediately following the event. It provides immense data. How quickly they regain their equilibrium, whether they circle in a specific direction, or the depth of their temporary blindness or confusion, all of that helps the specialist map the severity and origin of the episode.
Oh, I wouldn't have thought of that.
And furthermore, the guidelines emphatically request that you narrate what you are observing in real time.
See, this surprised me. Wait, narrate the video. One, I just sound panicked and shaky. I assume that would just be useless background noise for the vet.
I know it feels counterintuitive, but your verbal narration serves as the real-time clinical chart notes for the video.
How so?
Well, even if you are distressed, vocalizing specific details, saying out loud, he is excessively drooling, or she just urinated, or his eyes are vibrating side to side, that locks that data to a specific timestamp.
Ah, okay.
The specialist might be viewing the video on a small screen or dealing with poor resolution. Your real-time observation allows them to focus their attention entirely on analyzing the complex neurological movements rather than trying to rewind and squint to see if the animal's pupils are actually dilated.
You're providing the sensory data the camera can't capture.
Ex-
So, okay, you've gathered all the evidence. You have the AI grimace score, the behavioral logs, the perfectly framed narrated video showing the episodic event. You know definitively that your pet is in distress. Now you face the ultimate triage decision, right?
The hardest part.
Do you throw them in the car and speed to the emergency room at 3:01 a.m., or do you wait for a standard urgent care appointment the following morning?
Differentiating between a true physiological emergency and urgent care situation requires an understanding of biological urgency.
Right.
The triage protocols are explicitly clear on what constitutes a drop everything and go emergency. Severe respiratory distress is at the very top of the list.
And we don't mean just panting.
No, this is not heavy panting after playing. This is gasping for air, violently using the abdominal muscles to force the chest open, or presenting with pale gray or blue gums.
Framing that in terms of biological urgency, blue gums means systemic oxygen deprivation.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that's hypoxia. The tissues are starving for oxygen, and irreversible brain damage or organ failure is quite literally minutes away.
So go immediately.
Immediately. Other immediate emergencies include uncontrolled hemorrhage, so blood that is actively pulsating or refuses to clot after 5 solid minutes of applied pressure.
What about physical injuries?
Severe blunt force trauma, like being struck by a vehicle, is an automatic emergency regardless of how the animal is acting, because internal hemorrhaging is invisible and rapidly fatal.
That makes sense.
Also, sudden collapse, profound lethargy where they literally cannot lift their head, or any suspected ingestion of a toxinol, all of those mandate immediate ER intervention.
Okay, so that's the 3.00 a.m. emergency list. Urgent care, on the other hand, is for conditions that absolutely require medical intervention within 24 hours, but aren't actively threatening the animal's life in the next 10 minutes.
Right, there's a buffer.
This includes persistent, mild vomiting or diarrhea lasting more than a day, provided there is zero blood present. It includes a consistent, non-weight-bearing limp where the animal isn't vocalizing in extreme agony, or a sustained refusal to eat that stretches beyond 24 hours.
Yeah.
It really is the equivalent of deciding whether to call 911 for a human experiencing chest pain versus driving yourself to a neighborhood walking clinic for a severely sprained ankle.
The walking clinic analogy is highly accurate. A localized musculoskeletal issue, like a limp, causes significant stress and localized pain, absolutely. But it will not cause systemic organ failure overnight.
Right.
However, the triage guidelines offer one overarching safety net. If your observation of the animal's behavior triggers your gut instinct that something is catastrophically wrong, but the symptoms don't perfectly align with the textbook list, pick up the phone.
Just call them.
Call the emergency room for professional phone triage. The technicians are specifically trained to analyze your narrative and calculate the risk factor for you.
Let the medical professionals make the final call.
Exactly.
Well, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground in decoding this secret language today. We started by exploring the evolutionary drive that forces our pets to mask their vulnerability and the broad mechanical shifts in their daily routines we need to keep an eye out for.
We really went from the big picture down to the micro.
Yeah. We zoomed into the complex geometry of facial tension, seeing how tools like the feline grimace scale and AI algorithms measure pain in millimeters. We unpacked the internal puzzle of FLUTD, detailing how psychological stress chemically breaks down the bladder wall. We established the rigid clinical rules for using your smartphone to document dynamic, episodic pathology. And we wrapped up with the biological framework for triaging a medical crisis.
And the ultimate objective of all this data and technology is really singular: to give our silent companions a voice. It allows us to bypass their evolutionary poker face and deliver precise medical care exactly when they need it.
Absolutely. And as we close, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought regarding the incredible trajectory of the technology we've explored today. I mean, if a smartphone app can already mathematically decode a cat's hidden pain from a single photograph, and our personal devices are actively replacing MRIs for capturing sporadic neurological data, how long until the smart home cameras already sitting on our bookshelves are continuously running ambient real-time health diagnostics on our pets and potentially even on us?
Wow, yeah.
We might be entering an era where our homes alert us to a degrading biological condition weeks before a single symptom is consciously felt. It certainly changes how you look at the camera lens in your living room. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see